Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Andrii Zakaliuk. On behalf of the team of Mediacentrу Ukraine, I welcome all the journalists telling the world about our struggle for freedom. It is August 29th, and this is the day when we commemorate the victims of the Ilovaisk tragedy. 8 years ago, the Russian occupiers barbarically shot at a large column of Ukrainian military who were leaving Ilovaisk, evacuating Ilovaisk along a humanitarian corridor. This was one of the many war crimes perpetrated by the Russian Federation as part of this war that is now in its 9th year. Today, we will be talking about something that is very important from the point of view of national security, which is education. We are 3 days away from September 1st, the start of the school year. As we're winding up the preparation for the start of the school year, I would like to give the floor to Andrii Zakaliuk, head of the Education Office of the Lviv City Council. Andrii, to what extent is Lviv prepared for the start of the school year? Hello, dear colleagues. The first thing I need to say is that over the past few months, we had the very important discussion of what format we're going to use when the school year starts, and we set ourselves the goal that from September 1st, our students ought to physically come back to schools, to the desks. Of course, there are different opinions here. We also looked at what the parents thought, and according to the most recent data that we have, as of last Thursday, we had our last monitoring where the school masters and school directors asked the parents whether they're prepared for the start of the school year and what learning format do they prefer. So the first thing is I would like to voice these numbers. As of today, 76% of parents are prepared, that agree that the children should begin their schooling offline, so that they should go back to schools, physically back to schools. Another 9% prefer distance learning, online learning, as we call it. We have small percentages of 1 to 2% of parents who have preferred to homeschool their kids or externally school their kids. These are usually parents whose children are still abroad. And then we have 8%, 8 additional percent of parents who are undecided. They're deciding whether their children will come back to the classrooms or their children will be studying online. This is as far as the percentages of children we expect in schools. Now, as far as another very important question is the question of the forms of learning, forms of schooling. If the children are coming back, because many want to know, if the children are coming back, we have many different options that every school should individually decide the format of the schooling. Of course, security was the main question, was the primary question. The number of children who can study at school offline depended on the number of places at shelters, at bomb shelters. Of course, the school cannot have more children than they have places in bomb shelters. So based on that, the school decided what format they should take, whether it would be a mixed learning form with offline, online, or whether there will be separate distance day, or perhaps the younger students will be online while the older kids will be in the school. This is very important to figure out in every school individually. We had many meetings with different directors of different schools, and we decided different options. And this is the best option we've decided is the option that the school decides for themselves. Of course, for our part, we'd like to say that we have the most questions for online learning. The parents who have decided that their children will not be going to school, to the classrooms from September 1st, so we offered them the following option. Every district of the city of Lviv has a school defined where their parents can turn to with the offer to study there in their online classes. We're looking at all of the preparatory moments so that the parents can register. And then when we have certain particular numbers of children, we'll open online classes. But it has to be clear for the parents that this is if that then the parents have to transfer their child from one school to another. And another very important thing is that I really want everybody, we really ask everybody's understanding, because there's one thing when a school simply switches to online learning, it's a completely different thing when they're teaching offline, and then another thing when there's all kinds of experiments in all different forms, which is quite difficult. It's technologically difficult, it's practically difficult, so we have to be we have to show understanding, because of course the school have limited resources in terms of providing all sorts of needs from the parents. So the schools will be determining this for themselves. This is as far as the forms of schooling are concerned. Now the third, and this is probably a key thing, is the question of security. Security was being solved starting from the spring with the various services of our city. With the emergency services, we looked at all the premises that can play the role of basic, very basic shelters. There are demands to the most basic shelter, and it was according to these parameters that we moved along these parameters to see where children can stay in case of an air raid. 111 schools in Lviv have their own shelters. An additional 16 schools not have their own shelters, but they do have agreements with particular buildings or premises that are close to the school. This closeness, this means closer than 500 meters. 500 meters within away a maximum distance of 500 meters from the school. These are different other buildings or perhaps shopping centers, shopping malls. Of course, the kind of works that have been done in the preparation, there have been all kinds of works done. They differed because there are schools that are in different kinds of buildings, that are newer buildings with particular shelters, that are schools in old historical buildings, 300 years old, so that's a different kind of shelter. So the numbers of works that have been undertaken in shelters have been very broad. We tried to resolve the main questions, which is the entry and exit from the shelter. They have to be separate. Then seating places, ventilation, bathrooms, basic necessities, and also the fire safety. Fire safety, so that the children can be in these. Again, this differs school to school. So some schools have one large room. Other schools have shelters divided into separate rooms. There are questions that are still being resolved, because the works were done quickly and well, but not all the works can be done quickly. And this is also something that we need to acknowledge. We understand this, and we understand that there's a spectrum of works that are still being finished, that will be finished shortly, that will be finished in the next 10 days. And then there's also work that needs lots of capital, lots of investments. It needs a project. It needs a significant construction. So these works will continue later. So we had one commission that looked at all the buildings and shelters back in June. Then we had individual trips, and then in the past 2 weeks, we visited the shelters of our schools and also looked at them. Of course, there are drier buildings. There are more, but we have to understand that these are the most basic shelters. And this has to do with the shelters specifically. Perhaps there will be questions, and perhaps I would, and let's leave time for the questions. Yeah, okay. And then I would like to give the floor to Igor Brehin, who represents the emergency service of Ukraine in the Lviv region. Pane Ihoru, how would you say? What is the condition and preparedness prior to the school year? Hello, Slava Ukraini. I would like to start by saying that we've done a colossal work with the Lviv City Council, with the educators, to prepare schools to working offline. We started this back in the spring. from government decrees. There were commissions from the Lviv City Council and from the regional administration to prepare the schools to work offline. The Emergency Service of Ukraine, along with the Ministry for Science and Education, uh, prepared guidelines for preparing shelters in various schools and places of learning. This year, out of the just over 1900 schools, over 1500 have the necessary shelters. Only 7 places in Lviv do not have shelters. We've done a lot of work. Out of 284 places that are in the purview of the Lviv City Council, according to the guidelines, the idea was the shelters are supposed to be in the basements. If the shelter is for more than 50 people, it needs a second evacuation exit. It should be at least 2 meters tall, at least 6 feet tall. It needs medical and fire safety supplies, drinking water, and food. Basically, a shelter is supposed to allow people to stay there for up to 48 hours. The main administration of the emergency services have come up with instructions for evacuating people during an air raid. All of that information has been made clear to the teachers. Every school has people appointed to them to control the organization and evacuation to the shelters in order to ensure technological and fire safety. Are there any questions? Yes. Hello, Marta Bajdaka, Tvoje Misto. As far as ensuring the shelters, a lot of parents are concerned, as it seems to me, and parents also said this, that in addition to bathrooms, there's supposed to be a landline phone and Wi-Fi. Have the schools been provided this? At what stage are we this? No, we don't have this to 100%. 90% of the schools today have, according to the recommendations, including Wi-Fi, including bathrooms, or agreements have been said have been set if these are these are buildings that are within the 500-meter radius of the school. And this process continues. About 10% of the schools are still seeing works. Do you have anything to add, sir? Yeah, we wanted to say about this. Every school has to have a landline phone, and they have to have the shelters have to have internet. And so the schools where this is not equipped yet, it's continues. The work continues, and we're sure that this will be concluded in the nearest few days, because these aren't very difficult works that are hard to perform in schools. And if I may, there's a question to you, Andrii. As for this school where parents who only want to study online, could you tell us about district by district where these schools are? So perhaps the parents can get a sense of where they can register their children, how they can register the children. The registration for this will be done by our center, development center for school employees. You can find the contacts on the webpage of the education administration. Maria, who will be doing the registration. After this, the logistics is as follows. When we see that we have a number of children for a particular class, we determine the school where the parents can turn and transfer their children to study. In the Halitsky district is the 3rd school, and Sikhiv district is the 86th school, Leader school in the Lychakiv district, and in 77th school in the Zaliznichny district. But of course, we have to understand that if we have, for instance, 3 children to go to third grade, and then 3 children in a different district, again, we will combine them, because such classes will be opened when we have a particular number of students. But again, I think that this logistically will not be difficult, because this is about online learning, so they're not tied physically to the school. But yes, in every district, there will be the opportunity to even bring. I would just like to say that we are live, and parents are asking, will children be need to transfer from schools where they're registered? Yes, yes, they will have to transfer them. Yes, yes, that's the point. In order to transfer to these online classes of these schools, the parents will have to transfer their child, because we understand that the salaries of the teachers are determined according to the students. So we cannot replicate students. A student cannot be going to two schools, because we will not be able to have rational expenditures in the budget, which is not acceptable in the in conditions of war. Just to clarify, this means that the family will have the choice either to accept the rules that are in their schools, yes, determined in the school, or turn to us and transfer, yes, and they will have the opportunity to study online for their kids. And there's another question. There are now parent-teachers meetings in schools. They're preparing for the school year, and so of course there's now a schedule or the schedule for the curricula and schedule for early years. And so we see that kids from grade 1 to 5 will be studying from 8 to 11, and then the older classes from 11:30 to some hour. So in general, what do the parents do? Because people are at work. Perhaps you have some advice. What how should they talk to the schools? Thank you for this question. I think that this is more about variability in education, because if a school has 1,200 students and the shelter can only accommodate 500 students, I'm sure the schools will work in shifts, two shifts. But if the question is for primary school students, I would like to say that in every school there is a group, there's an extended post after school group, and we're doing our best to make it possible for parents uh, for the children to be at school while their parents are working. But again, I think that these are individual instances. Most of us, we understand, and of course, as far as younger kids are concerned, we primary school kids, we want them to come back to the desks, because we've all seen that online learning for younger kids is not good. Are there more questions from the room? I have a question for Pan Ihor then. You are familiar with the situation in the Lviv region, but perhaps you also know the approaches in other regions. How different are they from what we heard? So on the whole, the most recent meeting on the preparing schools to the new school year showed that the Lviv region leads in this question. 90% of schools are prepared to work offline. How are the other regions working? Are they using similar algorithms to prepare for the school year? Essentially, yes, but we understand that Lviv is much farther from hostilities, so it's much easier for us to do this work. And there are smaller requirements, smaller demands to prepare the easiest, simplest shelter than the schools that are close to the contact line. They have to use different security measures. Considering these demands, we have these. We will also have the slightly better results in the Lviv region. Do you plan to use schools and other institutions of learning to educate young Ukrainians about how to survive and to develop in conditions of war? Definitely, this work has been done earlier and will continue as part of the school year, as part of the curriculum. We have some hours allocated for security measures that will be addressed to all students in all schools. And Andrii, according to the survey results of the findings of the survey that you named, physical offline learning seems to be the priority. What are you telling the teachers who have to do all this work and do the kind of work that they haven't faced before? What do you tell them prior to the start of the school year? How do we create the proper mental attitude during this full-scale aggression? Well, it's extremely important, not only for the teachers, but also for the entire community of the city, that the question of learning, education, schooling unites us. We understand that the question of teaching children is extremely important, and the questions of education are really questions of national security. Today, in talking to our teachers, our school directors, our principals, we often say that we carry a very large responsibility. We understand the insecurity of the present age, of the present time, but we have to stay calm. It's very important to stay calm, to have trust in each other, and to understand that each of us, whether child or parent or teacher, uh, are interested in A, the security of the children, and B, providing the children with education, with knowledge and good education, because our country, after victory, our country needs intelligent, well-educated people. More questions from the room? Hello, could you tell us how the Labor Day, first school day will be celebrated? Will it happen to you? We haven't done any particular recommendations. We do not recommend holding any special. But every school is its own climate, its own ecosystem, and the best thing would be for every school to determine the format themselves. Of course, sometimes we recommend not making this any kind of big gatherings of people. This should not be done, but perhaps in some kind of small, more limited, so that the children sense, because we don't want to take this away from the children, so they sense that this is the festivities. So maybe it's a smaller, and of course, the first lessons ought to be dedicated to the topic of safety and security. Thank you. Andrii Zakaliuk, Igor Brehin on the Lviv's preparation and the Lviv region's preparation to the start of the school year. I would like to remind us that at 1 o'clock we expect the leadership of the Lviv Regional Military Administration also to talk to them also about the start of the school year. Thank you very much for this